Daftaboutcraft, the craft beer podcast.
Well, we're here again. It's episode 60 of Daftaboutcraft, the craft beer podcast. And your hosts, as ever, for nearly 4 years now. Me, Dave. It doesn't seem like 4 years, does it? Me, Dave D.
And me, Dave B. I'm shocked by that, Dave. I hadn't even considered it, but of course it is nearly 4 years, isn't it? How time flies.
I know. I'm not sure we thought we'd still be sitting here doing this 4 years after we started. I'm not sure.
I've never really considered it. It's just sort of become a part of life.
It's just what we do now, isn't it? Every couple of weeks we get together and talk about beer and drink some beer.
Yeah.
It's good. It's nice to have this as part of our lives, I guess, isn't it? Now, look, a few episodes ago, at the very start of the episode, we said, this is a warning, this is a putty-free zone. What is this episode, Dave?
This is a Chubbles-free zone.
There is no Chubbles talk apart from this. There is no Chubbles drinking. Chubbles will not be discussed. Chubbles just blackout.
Yep, there's really no need. And to be honest, I don't know about you. I haven't seen loads and loads about it. I've seen a little bit, but I haven't seen loads.
At risk of now talking about it when we said we wouldn't, neither have I actually, which is good, because when we first started, we were into these really big beers and the hype stuff and everything, but now we've found our way a little bit differently. We do have a feature called Hype or Tripe, of course, but we don't feature those massive beers. In fact, we've got 2 beers this time on Hype or Tripe.
Yeah. Probably 2 of the most interesting beers we've had for it for a while, actually.
So the brewery is called Yorkshire Heart.
So we've got a Pinot Porter and a Nelson IPA, but they come in wine bottle size. They look magnificent. The beers themselves might not be sort of as entities that different. You know, a Nelson IPA, a Pinot Porter is a bit different, nice take on a porter, but it's everything that comes with it, as you will hear when we hear from Tim at Yorkshire Heart.
Exactly. And we've got a really fascinating chat with somebody who really, really entertained us, didn't you, Dave?
I think I'm still a little bit starstruck. So Mike from Breakbeat Brewing has just sort of lived, I think, a lot of people's lives already. You know, he is someone who was and still is within the music industry. And then when you've been successful in the music industry, and specifically within the dance music industry, something that's very close to my heart, you then, of course, want to brew massive stouts and massive barley wines. There's not any ounce of entertaining a 5% hazy pale. It's just not going to happen on Mike's watch.
That was clever there, because his name is Mike Watch.
I wish I'd known I was consciously making that pun.
But yeah, so we've got that interview, which is fascinating. We've also got our usual features, and we'll kick off, as we usually do, with Brew to Me, where we try beer from a brewery we haven't had before. And I'll utter the immortal words as I always do. What have you got this time, Dave?
This time, I'm in the north of England. Specifically, I am up in Newcastle upon Tyne, and I have got a beer from Brinkburn Street Brewery, who, having used a little method, which I will not divulge, we both know how to use it. We've found a great way of hopefully finding plenty of new breweries, and Brinkburn Street came via this method, got in touch with them. They came back, and Lee, who you'll hear from in a bit, came back and said, yes, of course, we can send you some beers. And when he said he can send me some beers, he wasn't lying. I got the most varied selection of 4 beers I think I've ever seen from one brewery. So I got the beer I'm going to try in a minute, which I'll get to, Biker Brown Ale, so brown ale, another beer which unfortunately my mind has gone blank for, and then also very kindly I got an Imperial Stout in another wine bottle.
You're doing very well at getting these big bottles.
I know. I've even taken over a shelf on Katie's wine thing, which I don't know if she's noticed yet, but if she does, she ain't going to be happy. And the thing is, I've got a couple more I could put on there as well. But anyway, I digress. But the beer I'm drinking is called Hit the North, and it's actually a collab with Steam Machine, who, just as an aside, are a very interesting brewery that I think perhaps we should look to explore a little bit. From what I can gather with them, they're a sort of subscription-based brewery. You can't necessarily get a can of Steam Machine out and about. But anyway, that's for another time. What I've got here is Hit the North, which is New England IPA, 5.6%. Brinkburn, in their own right, have got loads going on. They're not just a brewery. They've got a thriving tap room. As part of all the beers that came through, I also got their winter bar menu, which I will just go grab in a minute and just talk to you about because it's very fascinating. But of course, the most important thing is the beer itself.
Now, the Biker Brown Ale gives away their location. They're in Biker in Newcastle, aren't they? And, you know, we think of Newcastle and we think of Full Circle, 2x2, these sort of breweries. Yet there's a lot we still don't know about, like this one. I hadn't heard of them before. Just reminds me again that I've got to try and go to Newcastle at some point, spend a weekend up there and do some of these breweries.
So that doesn't taste of 5.6%. It's very soft. And just to talk you through what we've got. Well, it's been brewed with Sanders New England yeast, which is their own yeast, and torrefied oats to produce hazy, easy-drinking New England IPA. Combination of Citra, Talus, and Idaho 7 on both the hot and cold side. Slightly different combo. I quite like that.
So must be sort of quite fruity with a decent mouthfeel, I guess.
Yeah, I'd agree with both of those statements. Really soft, really, really nice finish, actually. I'd say that's a fair bit of Talus and a little bit of Idaho 7 comes in at the end. Citrus, it does the donkey work, as you'd expect. The Talus is there. When I think of Talus, and for everyone out there, here's your first mention, I do think of Copper Beech's Talus beer because it's still the best example I've had of Talus getting all of that fruit out of it.
Family tree, yeah.
Exactly. But this isn't far off. It's not got that sort of edge to it. It's really well rounded. It's right up my street. It's been done very well. I'm very happy.
Now, I bet the majority, like ourselves, of our listeners won't have heard of Brinkburn Street. So isn't it amazing when you find a brewery who's doing a really good pale like that, which, judging by what you've just said, stands up very well against some of the bigger players out there?
Easily. I'd drink that in a heartbeat. If I found that on tap somewhere, I'd have a pint. And if I was with people, I'd be saying, oh, you should have a pint of that. That's really, really nice.
Just the sort of brewery we like to find.
Well, should we just let Lee tell us a bit more about them? And then he can tell us a bit more about that one of the other beers, because he very kindly sent a voice note on all 4 beers. It felt rude to not hear about one that I can then try in a bit.
Hello, this is Lee Renforth here of Brinkburn Street Brewery, Biker, Newcastle. We were formed back in January 2015. We remained as a microbrewery for alone, supply and trade for about 3 years, and then we set up our brewery, bar and kitchen here in the Ouseburn Valley in Newcastle in 2018. Since then, we've pretty much focused on supplying our beer direct to the customer here on our bar. We have an event space as well upstairs here. That focus really has been a result of what we felt was quite a bit of oversupply to the trade industry here. Certainly in Newcastle, we had probably too many microbreweries and not enough outlets for the beer. So we've taken on a sort of US microbrewery model, more so with the direct-to-customer approach. That means that well over 90% of the beer we produce, we do sell direct to customers over the bar and, via the internet and so forth. So, we feel, that model works quite well. We've been able to build a big tap house with kitchen, with bar food, and as a result of that, we only supply to, very selected bars and, packaged beer into selected outlets as well. So that's really the approach of the company is more so in the US microbrewery model. We've had to invest, a fair bit of money to get that to happen, but we're quite happy with the decision of focus direct to customer. Brinkburn Street work in very close collaboration with another brewery, which is Steam Machine Brewing Co. of Newton Aycliffe. Head brewer there and owner is Nick Smith. As a result of the collaboration over the last 6 years, we've been able to produce a really wide range of beers, from traditional cask beers, blondes, browns, bitters, and also a new wave of the modern craft beers, New England IPAs, and so forth. So the collaboration works really well. As a result of it, we have over 20 beers on at any one time in here, all brewed between ourselves here in Biker and our shared brewery in Newton Aycliffe, Durham, where Steam Machine Brewing Co. is operating from. We have hit the north. It's a New England IPA, brewed in collaboration with Steam Machine Brew Co. It is hazy New England, brewed with saturated yeast. It's a great example, I think, of how we've been able to work closely with Steam Machine to produce what is still and remains, the fashionable craft beer choice of the UK. Probably has been now for 3 years. This comes in at ABV 5.6%, which is where we find the New England start tasting really, really nice and rich with a strong mouthfeel. So we hope you like it.
Thanks very much to Lee there from Brinkburn Street. Sounds like a really fascinating setup they've got there, doesn't it?
It does. And then when you get to see, it'll just show you, here's what you could choose from anyway. Pilsner, Session Pale, a Blonde, a Pale Ale, another Pale Ale, a New England, another New England, the one I'm drinking, another New England. These are all different strengths and hop combinations and whatnot. A double, then an American IPA, a UK-US hybrid IPA, another IPA made with Earl Grey tea leaves.
Ooh, I like that.
Then we're on to, there's a bitter, then there's a brown ale that we've mentioned, a stout, a Shiraz grape and honey porter.
Ooh, interesting.
Chocolate and raspberry porter. And then one of the beers that Lee sent, which is the one that most interested as well about, but couldn't face drinking a whole bottle of it one sitting. Imperial Raspberry Stout and Sparta FC, which is the Imperial Milk Stout, which they've sent me at 10.4%, which Lee will talk about in a minute. And I'm not done yet.
Blimey.
Saison Stout. And then there's also House Cider, Jungle Juice Sour, and last of the barley wine.
Like he says, the majority of what they make goes through the bar, and you can see it, can't you, from that list?
You cannot say there's not something for everyone there.
No. Even your fussiest drinker would find something there.
Yeah.
Well, let's have a listen to Lee now talking about that stout and see what he's got to say about that.
Finally, we have, last but not least, our Sparta FC Imperial Milk Stout. And this is a collaboration brew with Steam Machine. It's on the back of about 8 years of developing milk stouts of various types. This has all the traditional sweetness of an imperial strength milk stout and has very strong molasses chocolate notes within it, quite boozy as you could imagine and quite sweet. So we really like this. It's in a 750ml sharing bottle and it has this ABV of 10.4%. It's very rich, almost like a dessert liqueur beer, we'd describe it. So very nice in small quantities, drunk out of smallish glasses, and has that extreme sort of decadent richness of the imperial export strength milk stout. We think it hits the spot. We see it as, again, a great example of the collaboration between the two microbreweries. Okay, that's a beer descriptions complete. I hope you enjoy the tastings.
Well, I'm very interested in those beers, and that stout does sound amazing, doesn't it? Get that open at some point.
It's got the lovely wax top. It's a gold wax top on a black bottle. It looks mint, and it's going to sit there, and I'm going to, I don't know.
Save it for when you come and see me.
Couldn't I? I've got a few bits like that I keep waiting to do things with and whatnot. But yeah, I think that's going to sit for a while, and I'll decide how best to use it because it sounds immense.
Well, Brinkburn Street sounds like a resounding thumbs up then.
And also, it's worth pointing out the can I'm drinking, the bottle and everything. Yes, you can get them there, but they've got an online shop. You can get their stuff there, and you can get the stuff on tap door as well.
Superb. Well, it's a lovely segue that, talking about the stout, into the beer that I've got, because I have got a black vanilla milkshake stout.
I also now have this beer thanks to you. I'm very interested to see what you're making of this, because when I opened the box of goodies you sent me, this was one that jumped out. Well,
I guess it's just a milk stout, isn't it? But we'll find out. But there's a really interesting story about how come I've got their beer. And this story came about when I went to Scotland in January. So we were going up the M6 and we pulled over at some services. Don't know if you know the services on the M6 very well, But
I know a few.
But Tea-based services is the really nice one with a farm shop and a nice restaurant. Really lovely. You'll know it if you've been there because the food in there is really nice. It's quite a nice experience going there. They've got another one in Gloucester as well. Anyway, I digress. But when we were there, pulled up in the car, parked the car, looked out to my right and saw this van. And I noticed the word brewery on it. Looked a bit closer, and it was Problem Child Brewery. So got onto Instagram, noticed we didn't follow them, followed them, sent them a message to say, I've just seen your van, can we get you on our podcast? And a few months later, here they are.
A very sliding doors moment, if you hadn't stopped there or if you'd stopped there an hour later.
You never know when you're going to find a brewery that could feature on Daftaboutcraft. So Problem Child are actually based in Parbold, which is in Lancashire. They very kindly sent me a box of beers, mainly bottles. This was the only can they sent me, and this is their only sort of real craft beer offering at the moment. So they do more traditional beers. Mm-hmm. But sent me a lovely handwritten note as well, thanking us for our interest, and they're really happy to take part. But all this from pulling over at a motorway service station.
That's the second motorway service station interaction we've had with a brewery, because, of course, I picked up beers from Bayonet at a Shell in Catterick.
You did, yeah. I bet there's a podcast out there talking exclusively about motorway service stations, I bet there is.
Well, it featured on Gavin and Stacey, didn't it, on their Christmas special, like the good ones and that.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. Okay, so I poured it out appallingly. The thing about milk stouts is that they differ from normal stouts in that they've always got lactose in them. Milk sugar. I love a milk stout, but sometimes they can be a bit too sweet because of that lactose. This is not too sweet. There's just a nice little hint of sweetness, but also a hint of spice as well for me, which I didn't expect.
Oh, is it cinnamony or...?
I can't quite put my finger on what spice it is. It's just spicy. But anyway, I like that. That's nice. I should say this beer is called Spaceman. It's 4.1%, which is a typical sort of ABV for a milk stout. Yeah, I like that it isn't overly sweet.
Is it thin to taste, or has it got a decent sort of bit of weight to it?
Not thick, not thin, somewhere in the middle, decent sort of mouthfeel. And to think that they mainly deal in traditional beers and more traditional styles, that's very good. I like that. Quite apt as well that I'm having a beer from a brewery called Problem Child, because if you ask my parents, or my mum, my dad's not here anymore, but if you ask my mum, she'd probably say I was a bit of a problem child as a youngster. And that is where their name comes from, as Rachel and Johnny from the brewery will now tell us.
Would you like to tell them where our name came from?
Our name came from because you were a dickhead growing up.
I suppose I was a little bit wild.
We banged around a couple of names that were looking for something that was more interesting than number 7, which was the number of the brewery, which was the house we lived in, and we now turned it into a brewery. Rachel was a bit of a handful growing up, and Problem Child Brewing just seemed to stick with it.
So it's like I was a problem child, but now I'm here brewing.
I say I was a problem child. I don't think I was a problem child. I think that other people had the problem. But there you are. You heard Rachel and Johnny talk about that there. And, yeah, it's interesting. See, so a brewery name came out of her experience as a youngster. And, yeah, you never know where things are going to lead, do you?
No, and it ties nicely back to, as you say, you just pulled over to some service stations and here you are talking about a brewery on the podcast. Things happen for a reason. But you seem very happy with that beer.
We've said this before, actually, recently. You have a stout a lot of the time and you don't really taste any hops in it. You just get malt and coffee and chocolate. You can actually taste some hops coming through here, which is quite nice.
I think the main issue I always have with a milk stout, and it's why I don't really gravitate to them, is I know what the first taste of an average one is going to taste like, and then after that I don't want it. But this sounds like it's got a bit more going on.
Definitely. I think you'll like this, yeah. I should say thank you for sending 2 cans down because one of them has made its way to Dave. I think you'll like that. It's not your typical milk stout, that's for sure.
I think if I was going to send you a Brinkburn beer, I'm probably going to have to buy you one because I'm very reluctant to give mine up now after that one. I'm absolutely delighted with mine. That Hit the North is one of the nicest New Englands I've had in a while. In obviously, as we always say, a very crowded market.
Love it. I just love it when we find great beers from great breweries that we hadn't heard of and that most of our listeners probably haven't heard of either. Superb.
Daftaboutcraft.
Now, if we ask you to name a craft brewery or two in the Southampton area, you might come up with maybe Unity or even Dancing Man. But how about Breakbeats? We reckon you're not going to have heard of them, but they love to go against the crowd, and we think you'll want to find out more after we've spoken to their main man, Michael Watch. So welcome to the podcast, Mike. How you doing?
Yeah, good, thanks. Thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure to talk to people about beer and try and get the name out there to a bit of a wider audience. So, yeah, it's good.
Your beers are a little bit different to most people's beers, I think, is the first thing to say, because there's a lot of hazy pales around at the moment and session beers and stuff. You don't go in for all that nonsense, do you?
No, we tend to stick to mostly over 10%. I have made a couple of beers that have dropped under that, but we've never released anything lower than that, and we do 10% upwards, so we've gone up to 21% ABV. I think was our second or third beer that we released, and predominantly imperial stouts to date, but I have brewed other styles, and we have some other stuff coming down the line, some strong IPAs and whatnot, a couple of barley wines that we've had floating around and what as well, and a winter ale I think was one of the ones that we did, which didn't quite turn out as a stout, but it's what we like, it's what we do, and it's what we love really. We're just trying to push the stuff that we enjoy drinking the most really.
And I knew we were doing this interview, I sort of thought, okay, strong beers. Well, the last sort of interview I remember where we interviewed someone who was just starting out and was doing strong beers was Tartarus. And Tartarus now still do a lot of strong stuff, but he's branched out and he sort of covers all styles. But your website just sort of says, no, what we like drinking is strong, and we're just going to stick to strong, so you can just expect more and more and more of the same.
Mm-hmm.
I get the impression Mike laughs in the face of weak beers.
Yeah.
I get the mickey taken out of me regularly by other drinkers and pub landlords. We went to the pub the other night and he was like, what are you doing in here? You don't drink anything at this level. It's all too weak for you. I mean, he was joking with us, but we just do what we like. I mean, that's the way that we've always said it. I mean, I know that every brewery is run in a different way, and people have got bills to pay, they've got staff to pay, they've got different flavours that they like. We have got our area that we like and we love. That's what we drink 99% of the time, and that's what we decided to go for. It's a passion project for us, and we feel that we know there's other breweries out there. You've got Emperors and Sinister that just do strong beer. Down where we are in Southampton, there's not really a great amount of strong beer. There's other breweries that do strong beer, but it's as and when. We just wanted to do it all the time. That's what we do. I mean, when we open, people told us we're mental. I mean, you can't do that. I mean, it's never going to work. We're nearly at our first birthday. We're doing all right. I mean, we're cooking along and we're enjoying what we're doing, and that's the main thing, really. So,
is the enjoyment factor the big thing here? Not making any money out of it, or do you want to make money long term, or is this just a sideline that runs alongside a full-time job?
Yeah, I mean, it's a love thing, really. I mean, we do make money out of it. We don't make tons of money out of it. I mean, everything that I've made up to date has been reinvested back in. I mean, when we started, we were bottle conditioning our beer, and then we had to move into forced carbonating. We're now doing kegging. We've got more equipment, but it's something that I do in my spare time. I mean, I work in the music industry. I do audio mastering and vinyl record cutting as my main job, and it takes up a lot of my time. But the beer thing is something that myself and my partner Holly, we both love doing. I do predominantly most of the brewing and whatnot, but she helps out with multiple, all the other little odds and sods and bits and pieces that need help with. But again, she works full time. She's got her own business, and we do it as and when we can fit it in. I mean, it's mostly weekends, and bottling and stuff like that gets done in afternoons, evenings, and whatnot when we've got time to do it. We don't ever really want to expand. I mean, I'm quite a firm believer that I know if I started to try and get a bigger kit and trying to move more into the direction of just doing that all the time, I don't think that the beer would transfer well into that environment, if that makes sense. Trying to make that kind of beer on a bigger kit would need a lot of investment, a crazy setup, do you know what I mean? To be able to do it, we'd need oversized mash tuns and this, that and the other. It's not impossible. There's other places that have managed to do it, and there's commercial breweries that brew that kind of beer, but I work in stupid ways. I'm not an expert, you know what I mean? I make a lot of things up as I go along, and I find my own way of working, and I don't see it progressing more than what we're doing. I can brew a lot more in what I have, but I don't ever want to get to the point where we have to turn it into a commercial full-time thing and sort of ruin the love of it, I would say. Probably end up being...
I always think this, when you turn something from a passion to a job, you can easily fall out of love with it. If you're really into your beer and you love brewing, you don't want to fall out of love with it, do you?
Yeah, well, I did exactly that with my main job. I mean, I used to work full-time as a music producer. From early 1990s, I wanted to be a DJ and a music producer. It's all I ever wanted to do. And when I got to that point, I was travelling all around the world and I was doing music, and I had releases on all the labels that I dreamed of being on. But there's a lot of stress, there's a lot of aggravation, there's a lot of problems in the music industry, and it very quickly becomes something I hated doing. I lost the passion for making music. I lost the passion for DJing and moved away from that, you know what I mean? And I left that, and it's taken a long time for me to get back into enjoying doing music production and DJing again. And that's something I'm very wary of with beer brewing, is I don't want to get to a point where I'm forced into doing it all of the time and I'm struggling to keep up with it and whatnot, because you just end up hating it. You know what I mean? I've already learnt that lesson the hard way before. So, you know what I mean? If I want to go 2 months without putting any beer out, I can do. You know what I mean? And we have done, and we can leave stuff. There's no schedule. I can sit there and I can go, that's due to come out next month. If I taste it and I'm not happy with it and it needs longer to condition, I can leave it and it can do that. And that's the pleasure that I've got at the minute, that I can make the product as good as it is, not burn myself out, and not get into a situation where I just go, I've had enough of this, I'm selling everything and giving it up, because it's a difficult game to play. I mean, you speak to a lot of breweries, I speak to a lot of breweries, we all know how difficult it is out there at the minute. More so for us because we're mental and we actually make stupidly strong beers, but we seem to get the beer out the door, people buy it, so we're at a level where we can tick along with it and be happy with it, and it's got space to expand slightly, but trying to open massive tap rooms and all of that, I don't think that we fit into that marketplace. Never say never, do you know what I mean? It might end up with some crazy stuff going on down the lines, and who knows, do you know what I mean? Imperial Stout could be the next hazy IPA and everyone wants it and everyone's going out buying 10% beer, but I can't see that happening, so for the time being, we'll just enjoy it and see where the journey takes us, really.
You spoke about not wanting to expand with the kit and everything. How big is the kit that you're on now?
I'm on a 100-litre gas-powered kit is what we brew on. That's already limiting us quite heavily. So on a 100-litre kit, I can get 50 to 60 litres of beer out of that. I've got a 100-litre fermenter, and I've got 2 20 litres in a fermentation fridge, as I call it. So we've got that split up, so I do batches of 40, batches of 60. I could go up to doing batches of 100, and we've got space for some more fermenters in there. But if I wanted to do 100 litres of beer, it would be a double brew day, so I'd have to do 50 and then 50 again, which I've done before with 2 batches of beer in the same day before. It's workable. It adds about 4 hours onto the day, but outside of that, if I wanted to expand, we'd be going electric, and I wouldn't be able to start doing the weird things that I do in the brewing process on an electric kit properly, I don't think. And so, again, never say never. Who knows how it goes along. I mean, I've got plans for a bigger mash tun and whatnot in my head already, but the brewery's 10 foot by 8 foot, and it is rammed full of equipment. I mean, like every single space and corner is full of gear, and everything's moved around to work with each other. But every single little nook and cranny has got something that lives there, that goes there. Do you know what I mean? Just make the most of it.
What are we talking then? Garden sheds, laundry, or garage? What is it?
No, what I built, I did it. This is kind of what come out of lockdown, really, because we were brewing in the kitchen before on a tiny little kit, with like the cool box mash tun. This was before we went professional sort of trade with it all. Well, when I moved, because I used to live in Newbury and I moved down here, moved in with my girlfriend. When I moved down here, we really had to move the house around to fit my music stuff in there, and I redecorated all the downstairs. We brewed a batch of beer and condensation running down the walls everywhere. So it was like, this is not going to work. Had a look at what the options were, and at the end of lockdown, I basically put the base down in the garden, put like a breeze block wall around there, and then we got a 10-foot by 8-foot metal shed, is what it is basically, effectively that, with nice sliding doors on the front, and just brought that brand new, put that all together. Brought the kit off of eBay, all cobbled together, kind of this, that, and the other, a bit here, a bit there, and got it all up and running. And we've had the kit in there now for, I'd say, about 3 years now. We've been going in there. It works. I mean, I'm happy with it. It's quite self-contained. Haven't managed to burn it down yet, so it all seems to be working nicely. So it's just always in my mind, what can I do with that? Can I put more space in there? Do you know what I mean? And try and work it out. I did say to Holly earlier, I was kind of eyeing up the patio area down the side of the house and thinking, could build over this whole area. And
you see, it's starting already.
Yeah, that's it. It's the temptations keeps creeping in, isn't it?
So when did you brew your first official beer as Breakbeat?
First beer for Breakbeat, well, our first released beer was last May, I think, that we had our first beer. I mean, working on the equation that I'm aiming for our first birthday beer in May this year, it must have been May last year that the first beer come out. So I think we're up to 12 beers out now in that period. So again, no rhyme or reason to that. It's just sort of as and when. We've had a couple out at the same time and dotted around, but...
So are you literally just making anything you fancy, or have you got a schedule that you stick to, or are you just making it up as you go along?
Just make it up as I go along. I mean, at the minute, I've got the birthday beer is nearly finished. I've got another beer in the bigger fermenter, which I brewed last week, and I worked out that I was going to brew that a week and a half before. I just went, that's what I'm going to brew, and ordered the ingredients and cracked on. I've got another beer to go in where the birthday beer is that I was going to brew before, but then that got moved around, so it's all very just... It falls into place, so to speak. I mean, what's going in the big fermenter next? Who knows? That's anyone's guess. It's just a case of I will get an idea and I'll go, right, that's what I fancy doing next. Off we go and plod along with that and order the ingredients and get it going.
I love this. It's like craft brewing at its rawest and most...
Taking the words out of my mouth, though, because I was just thinking this is like what essentially people do craft brewing for, There isn't release schedules. There isn't, we've got to have a core range and we're going to do this and then we're going to do a brew tap. Everyone started out with, I quite like brewing beer and I want the beer to taste like this. And this just seems like this is what you do, but actually you're doing it enough that you can put a little bit out into the world. If people like it, they like it. If they don't, you like it. So you're going to, you're going to enjoy it at home and just carry on regardless.
That's it. I mean, we always said as well that we're not really bothered about doing a core beer range either. It's making it more special, I think, just to say, right, everything is different. Everything evolves with the fact that we do predominantly imperial stouts and other dark beers along those lines. We don't just have one recipe that is every single imperial stout. Every single recipe and beer that we brew is a different recipe. Now, they're mutated variants of each other, and I might get into a certain malt and then start hybriding that around with different recipes and saying, I quite like that one, but I'm going to add that to that and take that out of there and sort of bounce back and forward with it. But you kind of find yourself in a situation where you're learning as you go along what people are picking up on and what they're liking. Whereas, as an example, when we first opened, I went out and I spoke to a lot of other sort of nano micro brewery owners, and some of them just said, you're mad, that's not going to work. Don't even start thinking about it. You can't do that. other places. I mean, I would say Damien from Emperors was a very good influence. He spent a lot of time talking to me, and he was just like, sounds brilliant, crack on, do it. It didn't stop me. Do you know what I mean? We're doing all right, do you know what I mean? And he gave me a lot of positive encouragement with it all. And we sort of trod quite carefully when we opened it. I mean, we didn't want to sort of jump straight in with some mental 10 million adjuncts filled beer. We started with something that was quite plain, and then we did something that was quite heavily adjuncted but with natural ingredients rather than trying to use flavourings. And then I just went straight in with the 21% beer for our third release, and
of course,
this is work. And that's the one that had the most positive feedback off of it, and most people are asking about. And so we're sort of thinking, right, great, we can start pushing up the ABV a little bit more, and that just helps us naturally progress. So now I'm thinking strong beer, stronger, stronger, stronger. Whereas before we were thinking, test that, see what happens with that, see what happens with this, do you know what I mean? And sort of see where we've ended up. And a year down the line, we're now in a position where I'm thinking 16, 17, 18% is going to be a level where we can sit quite nicely, and people are going to buy it and enjoy it and give us good feedback off of it. When was where we open, I'm thinking 10 to 12% is where we need to be at. So it's that natural sort of flow and change that I'm enjoying at the minute, and finding its own way would be the best way to sort of describe it, I would say.
So have you ever brewed the same beer twice as it stands or not?
No, never.
And you don't intend to?
I'm doing a rebrew of a IPA that I made before, because I made it as a test batch before we were open, and I had 2 cratefuls of it, and I dished them out to people as we go along. I say, oh yeah, have a go on that. Great feedback, and that is the one that I want to be our first IPA. So that's going to be the first beer that we've ever rebrewed. I mean, how close it's going to be, I don't know, because everything always changes and the variables are different and the malt's different, because we're 3-4 years down the line from when I brewed it last time. But that's going to be the first one that I actually rebrew. But outside of that, there's no plans to brew anything else again.
So you said before that you make it all up as you go along. How did you get into brewing then? How did this happen?
Well, I'll blame Andy from Elusive, and again Damien from Emperors from that, because me and the missus, we were quite into craft beer. We liked going out down the pub, and there's a lovely pub down the road from us called the Bookshop Ale House, and they do a lot of craft beer in there, and they're very knowledgeable about what they do. And I think they were probably the first place in Southampton to start getting beer in from Elusive. And Elusive do an event once a year. It's I think it's called Collabageddon or something. I know Brewdog do one, and they do one. I keep getting the names mixed up. It's Collabageddon or Collabfest. I think it's Collabageddon.
Yeah, it is.
And we went into the bookshop, and at that point we were drinking 5-6% beer quite happily. Never really come across any Imperial Stout, and they had Elusive, Emperor's collab, Obi-Wan Shinobi, I think that variant was called. And we saw the board, and it was like 12-13%. And we were like, oh, what is that? Yeah, that looks interesting. Tried it, and me and Holly both sat there and went, what is this? That opened the box. But then it was trying to get more of that beer to become difficult. So within about 6 months of that period, I was like, right, I'm going to learn how to make this stuff. I need to learn how to brew. So straight onto Gumtree, brought a brewing set up. And again, it was converted beer kegs, 2 kegs. So one was the boiler and one was the hot liquor tank. And a big mash tun was just a cool box. So brought all of that, didn't have a clue what we were doing, brought it home, chucked it all on the side, brewed a batch of beer. First thing that happened was the kettle blew up. As soon as we started boiling it, gone. There's smoke coming out of that. So we had to leave the beer sat overnight, get up first thing in the morning, and then we were driving all the way around Southampton to get a big stock pot, big enough to put the beer in to boil it, and then boiled it on the gas hob, because the 4 rings, massive stock pot on there. Emptied the beer out in there, and the beer tasted nice. That one came out really good, and we were really happy with that. But it's like I said, at that point, we did not have a clue what we would do. We thought, we made a beer at one point where we wanted it to be really chocolatey, so we put tons of chocolate malt in there. It just turned out like vinegar. It went down the drain, and we were like, oh, what's going on here? didn't have a clue. My dad gave me a few pointers because he used to brew back in the day, and there was a few books that he recommended that he'd read, and I got onto eBay and just bought every single beer brewing book that I could find, and within 8 months we were brewing imperial stouts that we were happy with, and we were like, yeah, these are tasting nice. I mean, we were just looking at all over the internet trying to find recipes and any kind of advice we could do, and then just over that next couple of years was just sort of working out what the hell I was doing, making our own recipes, like just finding our way with it, really. So it was just that one beer that one day. If we hadn't walked into the bookshop on that one day, we never would have had it and probably wouldn't be sitting here now talking. Do you know what I mean? It was
That's
just
incredible.
that one case that just set us off on the journey, and now we're sat here selling beer to the public and going, well, what happened there?
I love the way you're so matter of fact about it. Oh, the kettle just blew up. Oh, well.
Yeah,
Crack
sod's
on.
law that was. A sod's law. We were having a nervous breakdown at the time, we really were, but it was just painfully funny looking back on it. I mean, it really was. It was just us two idiots standing in the kitchen drinking beer going, yeah, we know what we're doing. We didn't have a clue. I mean, we were literally just reading stuff on the internet as we're doing it. Sparge? What's a sparge? I mean, and then Googling it. What is beer sparge? Oh, add water. Right, boil some more water. And just disorganised chaos. But the first beer was good. It was drinkable. It was all right. It was nice. I mean, there wasn't really any problems. It was only after that point where we started to go a bit doolally with it and say, right, let's throw everything in there. Right, put everything in the mash tun. And then it all started to go a bit wrong, and we were getting some terrible beer. And in the end, it was like, right, we need to read some books. We need to find out what's going on and get some good advice. Just taking that time, did the research and found our way with it.
I'll tell you what, though, you've obviously got a talent for it because we've both got beers in front of us. I don't know about yours, Dave, but I'm enjoying mine very much.
Excellent.
So we've both got different ones, because it's worth saying at the moment as well that you haven't sort of got a web shop or anything. If you want the beers, you've got a few sellers that you use and things like that. So we sourced them. Got 4 different ones. We've got 2 each. I'm not having both tonight, but so I've got Valley of the Shadows, which is your first ever adjunct-free Imperial. I can't genuinely remember a 10.5% adjunct-free beer which I've drunk this quickly and easily. It's worryingly smooth. It's worryingly easy to drink. I always think with the adjunct-free stouts that they can be a bit one of two things. It's either they say it's adjunct-free, so it's going to be quite malt-based, or it's going to sort of be, it'll be quite chocolatey. It's never either, and it just gets quite malty and a bit bitter and a bit roasty. And that's all you get. You get one note all the way through. I don't get that at all with this. This is just super smooth. I get a bit of chocolate. I get a bit of malt. I don't really get any roastiness. It's just really smooth. Like, what was the sort of thinking and the planning behind this one?
When I did that beer, it was, again, very much a case of, right, I looked at what we'd done previously for the last few beers and then said, right, we need to do something that's a bit more plainer for the next one, because it's trying to sort of get that balance. Some people don't like this, some people don't like that. Again, with that, it had been a while since I'd really started thinking about not putting extra stuff into beer, because I have a bit of tendency to start getting a bit involved with coconut or cocoa powder or this, that and the other. And I mean, my sweet tooth starts kicking in. And with that one, I wanted to just sort of see what we could come up with without doing all of that, if that makes sense, because we've been so focused on this and that and this and that, and every beer had something random going on in there. And it was, again, just picking through the previous brews, looking at the recipes and saying, right, that one, I mean. And again, I think with that, I was getting into Grambius honey malt, which I think is from Canada or somewhere. You can't really get it in the UK. There's no other sort of malt places that do it. And I'd used it on something previously and tasted it, and I was like, yeah, I really like that. It's billed as a honey flavour, but I think it adds a very sort of golden syrup, sort of Tate and R golden syrupy flavour to it. So I wanted to sort of see what that was like sitting in a beer without anything else in there. That was the kind of thought process behind that one, really. You were sort of seeing what happened when I was messing around with that malt a bit more. And so, yeah, it was only one place that I could find that actually had that stuff, and which was in Ireland. And so it's quite expensive to get hold of that. So I've stockpiled a bit of it and been picking away at it over the last few beers.
very susceptible to that kind of talk. We both are, but now you've said it, I'm sort of like, oh yeah, I knew there was a different taste to it, and I wonder if that's now what I'm sort of thinking it was. It's sort of at the start, I get it a bit. Which one have you got, Dave?
Right, so I've got the Angel's Fell, which is a bourbon barrel-aged imperial stout. Where are the barrels then? Because surely they're not in the shed as well.
Yeah, we've got little space for one tiny 20-litre barrel, which is where that was sitting. So when I done the barrel-aged beer, we used the barrel twice, and I think the Angel's Fell was the second beer that had gone in there. So as soon as the first beer come out, and within 10 minutes, that next beer had gone into it. And by the time that one was ready, I'd got so fed up with that barrel being in there that I said, right, that's it, it's going now. And a local homebrewer around here, he come around and brought the barrel off of me, and he's now got a stout in there, which he took out 2 days ago. I think that come out of there, and I'm eagerly awaiting a sample of that to see whether it went for the third round. But I said at that point, I'm not doing any more barrel-aged beers because the barrels are expensive. Do you know what I mean? And for a small, big scale, no problem. Do you know what I mean? It's absorbed. For a 20-litre batch of beer, for a barrel that costs £126, I think that cost me. Luckily, split between 2 batches of beer, but it adds a considerable amount on when you've only got a 20-litre batch. But I did say, I'm not doing any more barrel-aged beer. And now I've already planned to get 2 more barrels, and November there's going to be 40 litres going in, sat over the winter, because that space in the summer will get used for conditioning. I'll have stuff down there that's sort of aging and doing its thing. Over the winter, it gets freezing cold out there, so we can't really get away with using that space for that, whereas the barrels, nicely insulated, they're not going to have any problems over the winter, as we found last year. So again, it comes back to maximising the space. So summer, no barrel aging, winter, barrel aging, and sort of bouncing between the two, really. But the thing is, I hated the barrel being in there and taking the space up. But the 2 beers that I got out of it, I've absolutely loved. I haven't had tons of feedback about it from people that have tried it or general public, but me personally, I was over the moon with how I got both of those beers to come out, and I felt that the barrel woodiness and bourbonness of the barrels just worked perfectly.
100%.
It wasn't overpowering, and I've got the bug for that now again, you see, so now I want to do more and sort of get some more going and sort of see how that goes for next year again, so...
Yeah, that sort of that woodiness and the bourbon, it really comes through, but not overpowering like some of these beers can be. If you'd have given me this and said, oh, this guy only started making beer a few years ago and he made it up as he went along and he didn't know what he was doing, I'd laugh at you, because the taste of this belies what we've just been told.
It's very accomplished, I would say.
Well, we try our hardest. That's the main thing. I mean, I think that we say, yeah, we made a lot of it up as we go along, and and we didn't know what we were doing a few years ago. But I don't think that we're really the only people out there that have been in that position, so to speak. I mean, I think there's quite a lot of other places out there that are the same thing. They've never brewed beer before, and then all of a sudden they've just gone, what's this? And now they're massive. Do you know what I mean? There's multiple places out there that have come from nothing and just sort of decided to get into it. Some of them have been from a business point of view and they've seen it as a business opportunity and to open up something massive, and others are there's people out there that are just like me that have come from a sort of averagely knowledge homebrew background, done their research and then opened something up and have had success with it and cracked along. But many come and many go, I suppose, with the same with any industries, isn't it?
You mentioned Damien a couple of times from Emperors and Sinister as well. We've spoken to Sinister ourselves and that. What about sort of collabs and things like that down the line? Is that something that you're keen to do?
From the collab side of things, I mean, I guess that I look at that in the same way that I did with my music stuff. I mean, when I was doing music, there was always people wanting to make tunes together and stuff like that. And if it's someone that you want to work with, then that's great. Yeah, I mean, you get in the studio with him and you'd make some music with him, and sometimes it would come out and sometimes it wouldn't. With the beer side of things, I feel it's a bit of a different way, really. I mean, it's like I'd be quite happy to do collabs with people that I like the beer from, and I know that I could make a beer with them and it would transfer well, but I've had collaborations that other people have brewed and you can sort of see one brewery's pulled their way, and the other one's just kind of there by name. And it doesn't mean that there's any kind of bad beer out of the side of it, but for me, I like doing stupid stuff. Do you know what I mean? If someone comes to me and said, "Do you want to do a collaboration?" the first thing I would think is, "Do I like their beer?" If the answer is yes, the first thing I would say to them is, "Do you want to brew the most expensive, stupidly strong, mental, thickest, pain in the arse to brew, longest brew day beer?" If the answer is yes, and you're not bothered about how much money you're going to make off of it, you just want to make a really stupidly, crazy, mad, strong beer, then we can talk and we can sort of see where we can end up. But I can't have anyone coming here to do a collaboration because we're just sitting out in the garden. You know what I mean? Like most of the day long when I'm brewing, when I was brewing the other day, Holly's out doing the gardening and I'm sat out on the chair chatting away to her, making sure that the shed's not on fire and nothing's going wrong and whatnot. So there's a couple of guys down here that are good friends of mine, and we have said that we're going to do a collaboration together in the summer. There's a whole load of sort of background story, and we've got a name of the beer and whatnot to go with it. But they're good friends of mine, do you know what I mean? And we go out drinking and they're into strong beer, and I sit to them. In the summer, when the weather's a beautiful day, we can crack the barbecue going. I can kick things off in the morning, do you know what I mean? We can work out the recipe when we're down the pub and discuss what we're going to do. And they'll come around later on and they can poke and prod things and help do this and help do that and help with the cleaning. But that would be about as far as that goes. I mean, I've had my mate round here before trying to get him involved with it, and he just wanted to sit on the chair outside and watch what was going on. He didn't want to help with dig this out and change that and lug this around. So as far as doing stuff here, I mean, it's just an impossible endeavour, really. There's not the space to do it. I mean, when Holly comes in to help me mash in, that's the space done. Do you know what I mean? She's on one side trying to pour sacks of stuff in. I'm on the other side trying to stir stuff in, and the cats are trying to get in, and it's just carnage. And so, yeah, I'd quite happily go and do stuff with other people if they wanted to do something mental and I like their beer. But I'll probably get there and I'll be like, well, we need to do that. And they'll be like, well, what the hell are you talking about? That's not what you do. Do you know what I mean? So again, I've just found my own stupid ways of doing stupid things. Do you know what I mean? And whether that can transfer to doing stuff with other people or not is another question. But it's something that's open to discussion down the line. But I mean, who knows what could happen and where that could end up, really. So
it's surely got to be a three-way collab, Dave, with Breakbeat, Empress and Sinister, hasn't it? Surely.
Maybe throw in Bang the Elephant or something.
Oh,
There'd be more along your lines.
That would certainly end up causing some very high ABV carnage. I think Bang the Elephant, Sinister and Damien, they just done a three-way, I think it was an oyster stout or something like that. I'm sure I saw something about that the other week.
What I love and what comes across here is it's all sort of totally organic and there's no pressure. You love what you do. You're enjoying it. You can just do what you want. The enthusiasm because of that really shines through.
It's an enjoyable thing for me to do, but I think that I've come into the industry in a very stressful time, and there's a lot of stress and there's a lot of problems, and a lot of the breweries that I know of and I see, and I know that times are difficult for them, do you know what I mean? Whereas we're small, do you know what I mean? We haven't got huge amounts of costs and do you know what I mean? And if I mess up a batch of beer, I can just throw it down the drain. If I don't like it, I can throw it down the drain. And I know I'm quite blasé with it all, but for me, it's just trying to do the best I can possibly do. And I feel that I don't want to be in a position where I'm standing there going, oh, we're the best, everything's going great for us. There's always room for improvement in every single thing that we do. And I think that there's a lot of problems out there with the beer duty changes and all kinds of stuff. I mean, we've kind of plodded along into the middle of it and we're standing there shouting about how we only make strong beer and blah, blah, blah. And I don't want sort of people to look at us and think, oh, they're just a load of big-headed bloody idiots that have waltzed in here and just being a bunch of morons, really. I mean, we try to fit in with an industry that we see is struggling and having a lot of problems at the minute, and hopefully find our own little way and get our corner of the market and see what happens. But it's difficult. We sell beer, the beer goes out the door, and we manage to sell it, all of it, pretty much on every single batch that we've done. But it's not as easy as that. Do you know what I mean? There's a lot of sort of knocking on doors and seeing the curtains closed, you know what I mean, and you're trying to talk to people and say, do you want any Imperial Stout? And they're like, no, you can't sell it, you know what I mean, it doesn't work. But we just do what we do. We found a few sellers that like what we're doing, and we push our beer out. They buy all of our beer, and it gets out there, and we're finding our way with it, really. So it's just trying to sort of find our own little corner and see what happens, really, I guess.
We've talked a little bit about all of the hardships at the moment in the industry, but because of your size and what you do, you've managed to avoid the impact of all this stuff by and large, I think.
I think that it was quite lucky that I noticed what was going on with the beer duty changes, because obviously that has affected us massively, but hasn't affected us massively because as part of the process of setting the brewery up, I did tons of business planning, and this is all stuff that I'd never done before. Like with all my music business, that's just organically just appeared from nothing. I buy equipment, it expands. With the brewery, it was very much a case of we have to do this properly. And as part of the business planning and and speaking to HMRC, it was made very evident to us straight away about the beer duty changes. So there was a lot of research done into that. And obviously with our first beer coming out in May and the beer duty changes happening on the 1st of August, it was kind of a very close event. So my simple way of dealing with it was not to take into account things like small brewers relief, etc., because we knew that was gone. As soon as August was coming along, it's out the door. We're not going to be able to benefit from any of that anyway. So when we first started off, our beers were sort of at the higher end of the price spectrum. As soon as September, October, November come along, everyone else's beers have sort of started to overtake ours, and we're sitting at a nice plateau, which is just about right. I mean, it's at the level where I'm happy with. 9 to 11 pounds is where our beer is sitting in the shops, which sounds a lot, but when you're looking at the cost of other beers in that same bracket range, and even stuff going down to 8.4 or 8.5%, I've seen for higher prices than us. So we could sort of preempt it a little bit. And because we didn't have that small brewers relief in the first place, it didn't have that knock-on effect with us, whereas a lot of other breweries who are working with small brewers relief, they've got to this crossroads where it's either a case of, right, you can either go that way and only make beer up to 8.4%, or you can go that way and you're going to have problems with your small brewers relief, and that's going to change this, that and the other. So we've always paid full duty, we've always declared full duty, and I think that worked well for us because it meant that transition into the new duty system didn't cause any problems. It also meant that there was a lot less Imperial Stout in the marketplace, which, although that sounds good as a business for us, yeah, great, less competition. It's not, because that's what I love and that's what I like to drink. Now we find ourselves in a position where we're struggling to get hold of the beer that we like. We go to the pubs, and the pubs that would normally have Imperial Stout on, they're saying, can't get the stuff. You know what I mean? We're just starting kegging, and I've got places crying out to get kegs off of us, like queuing up. And I'm like, I'm doing one, and then when the next one's coming, I don't know. You know what I mean? Because, again, we've got to get that system and work it and make sure that we're happy with the quality and everything with that. But it's difficult for the bars to get it. It's had a big knock-on effect, I think, with all of the changes that have happened. And I think that we've managed to sort of slide through that quite easily, whereas other places have had a lot of problems with it. And hopefully in the future, it'll sort of settle itself out, and we'll see places start to work their way around it and find their ways to making stronger beers again, because I don't look at it as competition. I just look at it as more good beer to drink. I mean, the more places there are making Imperial Stout, excellent. I mean, that works good for me. It works good for my partner, because that's what we want to drink.
So it sounds like kegging is your next stage then. That's the next exciting bit for you.
Mm-hmm. It's something that from day dot we've been told we should be doing, and from day dot we've had bars telling us, I know that you won't do bottles, but I want kegs. I need kegs. I mean, they go quicker, it's easier to sell. Problem is getting hold of the things. Like, just getting 10-litre key kegs has taken me months, and in the end I brought 6 off of eBay because someone had a set of 6 of them. Happy days, let's go, grabbed them straight away, and that's my stock of key kegs at the minute. I spoke to the key keg company. We haven't got any stock of those. I can get them imported. It's going to cost you more money. They want to sell me a pallet of them. And I said to them, you want to sell me a pallet of key kegs? That'll be all the business you get out of me for 10 years, because that's how long it's going to take me to get through that amount of them. Do you know what I mean? So I've brought the kit to fill the kegs. The next step is trying to work out how to do that properly. I think I've worked it out, but again, it's very much a case of everyone's got their own way of doing it. So we're again going back to making it up as we go along. I'm either going to waste 10 litres of Imperial Stout next week, or we're going to have a key keg full of beer and ready to knock it out the door to the bar that's got first dibs on it. So it's something that we would like to do and get consistent with and start moving along with a bit more rapidly. But we've got to see how the first one goes. And then I think if all being well with that and it's moving and I'm happy with it and I'm happy that the beer's tasting as I want it to be and served as I want it to be, I then might possibly start looking at approaching some other breweries and say, have you got any 10-litre key kegs? I'll take 10, 12, whatever you got spare hanging around, and see if I can just sort of nab a few off of someone else, because key keg, they're not interested in really stocking them or whatever, because again, who wants 10-litre key kegs these days? Half places aren't doing Imperials anymore. That's predominantly the beers that would go in there. So you look on the Key Keg UK supplier site, no 10-litre key kegs. So it's interesting, say at least. Things like that you'd think you'd find no problem. But yeah, it took me about 3 months just to get the filling kit sorted out and ordered from them. So interesting.
What I think the most after talking to you is don't ever change. I love this. Don't ever change. Just keep doing stuff exactly the way you're doing it, because you love it and it comes across that you love it. And I hate for you to maybe get a little bit bigger one day and then not love it, because that passion really shines through, doesn't it, Dave?
Yeah, it does. It's really refreshing. We've had this a couple of times where we speak to people, and it's so nice to hear it as it should be. It's not, I know I touched upon it earlier with core ranges. There's nothing wrong with things like that, but just to be doing what you want to be doing, and if it happens, it happens, and when it happens, it happens, and it tastes really good when it does come out and everything. I love all that, and it just is. It's so nice to hear it all being talked about again, because it does feel a bit like everyone at the moment. Not everyone, that's not fair, but people when they're setting out at the moment, they set out and they go, right, we're going to brew this beer, and then we'll brew this beer, and then we'll brew this beer, and then we'll start doing that, and everything's run into a timetable and a projections and plans of growth and everything, but you don't seem to have any of that. If things happen, they happen. If they don't, they don't.
That's it. I mean, I think I'm quite lucky with the fact that I learned the hard way in the music industry about losing the love for something very quickly. And when I was in the music industry, people were looking at me and going, "Oh, I can't believe you're doing that. I'd love to do that." And it's hard. Do you know what I mean? And it was
as a failed DJ, I am quite jealous. So
it's something that everyone wanted around me, but I had it and I hated it. Do you know what I mean? I hated it, and it caused a lot of problems in my life. Do you know what I mean? And it's just constant stress. And with doing the brewery, it's always been in the back of my mind not to let that happen. And again, if I'm not wanting to go out there and doing anything, I won't go out there and do anything. If I think, I've got to brew beer this weekend, and it gets to the weekend and I'm knackered because I've been working all week in the studio, then I'll just go, I'll go down the pub. You know what I mean? See you later, and I'll reschedule it and crack on with it, because I enjoy it, you know what I mean? And we love the people that we've met, you know what I mean? It's a very friendly industry. It's a stressful industry, but there's a lot of nice people out there. I mean, I'll come back to Damien as a prime example. I messaged him, you know what I mean? And said to him, yeah, I'm thinking about doing this. Can I send you some questions? And he said, yeah, let's just get on Zoom. We'll have a chat, you know what I mean? He took an hour out of his evening. We had a good chat about everything, and there's other places like Jared down at Boscombe Brewing, which is down near Bournemouth. Again, didn't know me for Adam. I just messaged him, said, yeah, can I come and pick your brains? He was like, yeah, come down. Met him in the pub, brought him some beers, had a wonderful evening with him, bump into him regularly at beer festivals and whatnot. And it's just great to meet these nice people and be friendly with people all the time. And I love it. Do you know what I mean? I really enjoy it. But again, very wary of losing that. And the accountants, he keeps saying to me, oh, yeah, you need to do this, you need to do that, because he looks at what we're doing. He's like, yeah, but the beer's selling, do you know what I mean? You need to crack on, you need to do that. I'm just like, don't care, do you know what I mean? Not bothered, do you know what I mean? I've got other businesses that make money, and they're quite easy to deal with. The brewery can do what it's doing. If it makes some money, we reinvest it. We can buy the equipment we need. I can buy stuff that will make my life easier in the long run. Like I said, I'm eyeballing 300 litre mash tun. I mean, just purely because I think, well, I can fill that up then and get 100 litres of beer out of that. Whereas at the minute, if I do 100 litres of beer, that's an extra 3-4 hours on the brew day. So it's just seeing what happens and enjoying it, I think, is the best way. And people seem to be enjoying the beer. I mean, everyone says, don't look at Untapped, don't read that, it's bad. Or done all right. We get good ratings on there. Everyone enjoys the beer, do you know what I mean? And that's the main thing for me. If I looked on there and everyone went, this is crap, I don't like it, it's horrible, probably wouldn't have even got to the first birthday. I would have said, all right, we're not fitting in this industry. People don't like what we're doing. But if it gets to that point down the line, then I'll shut the doors to get rid of the HMRC side of things, say we're shut, and then I'll keep it as a homebrew setup, and we'll just brew beer and drink it ourselves and get our mates round and we'll sit out in the garden and drink it.
What a lovely philosophy. I love it. And the beer isn't rubbish. It's awesome. I've just nearly finished my bottle. I need to go and shut my eyes for a few minutes. I think I can feel the effects of it. Not in a nice way. It's sort of just washing over me. It's really lovely. Now, if people want to get hold of your beer, there's not many places that stock it. So do you want to give a quick rundown on where they can get it from?
Yeah, so we've got a good relationship with the guys who run Bitten Park stores. So they've got multiple things down there. So they do a shop called Bitten Park Stores, and we'd never met them before. When we opened, I went and spoke to the owner, and their whole philosophy is locally sourced produce, and they do everything in there. So from bread to sweets, you name it, they've got it in that shop. And I went and spoke to him because they sold beer. Told him what we were doing. He just started laughing at me, and I thought, oh, great, this isn't a good sign. And he said, I can't believe this, mate. He goes, I want locally sourced beer. I can't get locally sourced beer. He said, the majority of people that come in here looking for beer, they say one thing to me: have you got any Imperial Stout? And I'm always sitting there going, no. And he said, you just wandered in, told me you're making beer around the corner, and you're only going to be making Imperial Stout. So we've had a great relationship with those guys since we opened. They've set up a website now that just does the beer side of things, but they also sell the beer on their normal website. So they do Bitten Brew Co. is their beer website, and then Bitten Box Co. is their normal website. But they've got a shop in Southampton, so we sort of direct everyone there that comes to us for beer. Outside of that, we've got Priesttown Brewing up in Preston. I think they're somewhere up north, I think Preston. They've got a shop, and they've been buying our beer since first release, and they stock everything that we do. KG's off license up in Didcot in Oxfordshire. He's brought every single release that we've done. He does mail order stuff as well, so you can get stuff from him. And then we've got a Port Levathan beer seller down in Cornwall. He started picking up our stuff, and then obviously Left Field have been stocking our stuff as well, purely because I just emailed them and harassed them until they started stocking our beer. But Mike over at Left Field's been really helpful as well. I mean, he jumped on it straight away as soon as I talked to him about it, and they've had every release that we've done since that point. So he's been quite heavily promoting us in their newsletters and whatnot. We're talking to a distributor as well at the minute, and hopefully we'll have something in place later on in the year. But as for selling direct to public ourselves and having our own website, it's not something we're aiming to do at the minute because it's a lot of work, do you know what I mean? And to be honest with you, I'd rather get the beer out to the shops and help them to make some money. Do you know what I mean? We've got our profit margin. We're happy with that. We always knew what our profit margin would be. I don't want to start adding more work to my schedule by trying to eat into the shops and take the trade away from them. I'm quite happy to get the stuff out there to the shops and let them sell it, and they can make their money, and it helps keep the shops going and puts a bit of money in their pockets, really. I've got a stockist page on our website. If people forget all of that, they can just head over to the website, and there's a bit down the bottom that says stockist, and they can click on that, and it's got all the links and whatnot for all of the shops where you can find our beer.
Awesome. So that's breakbeatsbrewing.com.
That's the one.
That has been such a refreshing chat. I don't know about you, Dave, but I've really enjoyed that. The beer is fantastic. I love your whole ethos and what you do. You talk so well and so passionately about this. It's what we're all about as well. So it's been a real privilege to talk to you.
Excellent. Well, I've enjoyed having the chat. It's always nice to talk to people about beer, and any way that I can promote what we're doing and get it out there is always much appreciated. So thanks for taking the time out for asking me to come and talk to you.
Well, this is the music we use for our section called Tried and Tested, which is where we just talk about our favourite beer since our last episode. Dave usually kicks off, but he hasn't got a favourite beer. Does that mean all the beers you've had have been average?
I think I've probably missed a couple, but I know I can't have missed something that would have stood out because it would have got a review. I've had enough beer since, the last episode. I don't feel like I've had loads of days without any beers going on, but yeah, I think it's fair to say I've not had any beers that have really logged in my mind. Doesn't mean I've not had something I can talk about.
What you got to talk about then?
Well, I was going to talk about the fact that what was nice since birth of our son, not been out very much, but very recently we went out on a Saturday. We needed to come out because there was someone viewing our house, which we're trying to sell. So if there's anyone in the local area who wants to buy our house, you feel free.
That's the first time we've advertised a house on the podcast. Great.
Yeah, it's on Rightmove if you want to have a look. But yeah, we needed to get out and about, and I saw that there was it was a beer festival, but it was at a pub. It wasn't one of those ones where it was going to be sort of out in the cold if we needed to be, and the weather at the weekend was horrible. We went over, all of us, so me, Katie and Bobby, and we went to the Pakenham Fox, which is about half an hour away. The beer festival was with friends of the podcast, Artifact, and also Ampersand. So got to see James, had a chat to James and Kat, which was really nice. Tried a couple of their beers, which was great. Got to have some Cowella from Ampersand on cask as well, which is very nice. What was really interesting, though, was the bar at the Fox. I'd gone in there years ago, and it was standard offerings. But it now changed a bit, and they'd got they'd got the hand pulls, but I had an Abbeydale, a brewery that I rate. Sadly, the beer wasn't great, but I rate the brewery. And they had a Polly's on cask, which I did not expect to see, and that was very nice as well. That's the thing that I've enjoyed the most, actually, just going out and going back to a beer festival. And it wasn't mad. I had the Abbeydale, I had the Polly's, and I had a couple of Artifacts and Cowella, as I've said. So it wasn't like I was trying masses. It was just a lovely experience, and it was nice to get to go do something like that again, and good to see another place in the local area to me that's getting these kind of beers on.
It's really starting to take off down there. It's like you've
it's catching up. It does really feel like it's catching up. Obviously it's always going to be a bit spread out because of the nature of East Anglia, but there is now, as you'll find out again in the next episode, which definitely shines a light on my neck of the woods, there is stuff going on.
Well, I have had some nice beers, and the one I've picked was a straight up 5 out of 5 on Untapped for me. I don't give many 5s these days.
You don't? No?
Well, not that I've ever handed them out, massively all over the place, but I'm a bit more sparing with them these days. And I had this beer with my neighbours, and I just poured them a little bit, and they were not impressed. They didn't like it at all, but I absolutely loved it. It was from Origins, which is a subsidiary of Fine Ales.
Mm-hmm.
And this was a collaboration between Origins and Lynn Cidery, a blend of barrel fermented wild beers aged on apple pomace, kind of funky, cidery, beery fermented ale.
Now, you said at the start of the podcast that this has been going nearly 4 years. Did you imagine you would ever have a beer like this 4 years ago?
No, I don't think so. I used to hate all this kind of stuff.
Yeah,
absolutely love it now. One mouthful of that and I was like, wow, this is perfect. 5 out of 5, awesome. The beer was called Beerach, 6.2% beer cider hybrid. Funky, earthy, appley, just really interesting. We'd been drinking quite a few pales that evening and other sours, and it just broke it up because it was something completely different. Got to hand it to actually Origins and Fine Ales. They do a series of these beers, and I had another one the other night, which was also brilliant. I bought about half a dozen of them recently, and I've had other ones in the past. They can seemingly do no wrong. They're really, really good. And a big shout out again to Innis and Gunn, who keep getting mentioned on the podcast recently. I had another bottle of theirs recently, which was also outstanding. So these Scottish breweries with their wacky bottles, they do really well. There's some really good beers out there.
And now it's time for Hype or Tripe.
Well, the beers we've got now, you might not think they fit into the Hype or Tripe category, but they do because they're only brewed once a year, aren't they, Dave?
They are, and you know what? I'm not ashamed to say that I found these because we were on various Facebook groups, and it popped up that someone was reviewing them, and I thought, they sound really interesting, never heard of this. And obviously did my due diligence and got into contact and got them. And then they've popped up again. I know Gareth Williams, who's been in touch with this podcast before, he's had them. I saw him reviewing them a few days ago and seemed to really enjoy them. What I've seen on the internet, which is obviously a small snapshot, I've probably seen as much about these beers and I have troubles.
Interesting. Well, Gareth Williams is a very good judge, so if he likes them...
He did. They were very positive reviews.
So the brewery, as we mentioned at the start, is Yorkshire Heart, and I'd never heard of them before. You mentioned them to me, so...
I'd never heard of them. And yet here is Yorkshire Heart, a vineyard, a brewery, a cafe, just existing, doing its thing. And
I think that's the interesting thing here. They are a vineyard, so there's a lot of crossover between their wines and beers. And I've got to say, the swing top bottle is awesome. Don't you love a swing top?
It made such a good noise. And then I haven't even tasted mine yet, but I could just keep smelling mine.
So there's two different beers involved here, and I've got the light one, which we said at the start of the programme is a Nelson Sauvin IPA, and Dave, you've got the Pinot Porter.
It came out with this wonderful nose. I know I sound like I'm really going OTT on the praise, but I haven't had a beer smell like that for a while. Like, it was oaky, smoky, but not OTT, and it was brilliant. It was such an enjoyable experience. I haven't even poured the thing yet. Yeah, so it's Pinot Porter, perfectly aged to perfection in oak red wine barrels, 7%. So let's give it a pour. And this is, it says on the front as well, the batch 2022 harvest.
The thing I'm looking forward to with my beer, it's a Nelson Sauvin IPA. Now, do you remember when we talked about Nelson Sauvin a few episodes ago, and I was saying how my wife Lisa always says it reminds her of a PE changing room and sweaty socks and all that sort of stuff? I'm now really interested to see what these guys can do with Nelson, because I've had some other Nelson beers in the interim, and they can be quite dank and sort of almost cheesy almost.
Yeah, it's the kind of hop which you can sort of really pick out.
Having poured this out and smelt it...
You're just going to ignore me for that. I said it's the kind of hop you can really pick out.
Oh, very good. Yes, yeah. Very good, Dave.
Not an episode will go by until you get your revenge, which, incidentally, we should say might be coming soon, because the Siren Beers,
yes,
that'll have closed the day or two after this episode comes live. So we will let you know on socials what's happened.
The mystery beers. I want to change my. It's
not how it works.
Can I not do that?
I'm afraid you've got to stick with your Nectaron, although you can say, I was going to say now so you don't get accused of after timing, but I think it's
Rewaka, and I also think that the second one, we both agreed the second one was...
we said Mosaic, didn't we?
Yeah, I don't think it is. I think it was too muted for Mosaic. I think it's going to be a British hop that we hadn't considered.
Oh, like a Jester or an Olicana or something.
Yes. That way you'd have an American, an original American hop. You'd have a British hop and a New Zealand hop.
So either you've massively overthought this, or you've got it right on the money. It'd be interesting. Interestingly, actually, we were, just to go back to, we'll get to this beer in a minute, and I promise you it's really good because I have had a mouthful. I was going back to tried and tested when I was talking to James and Ampersand at Pakenham, because I tried one of Artifact's beers, which was a Damson-based beer.
Oh, nice.
And I sort of said, because he asked how the pod was going, I said, well, interestingly, we feel like this year we keep getting breweries on that are sort of doing twists on traditional styles. And they both said, yeah, I think that's the way it's going to go now, because brewing a pale and within brewing circles isn't very difficult. There is obviously a level of skill, but it's not the most refined skill, whereas doing more traditional styles and showcasing British hops and doing things like that is actually far more interesting to brewers.
I think we did pick this out on the podcast a couple of episodes ago, saying that is where maybe the immediate future lies.
It was backed up by those guys at least, and they certainly thought that was, the pales sell, but doing the other things is more interesting, and they also think people are getting a bit more into it as well.
I think the pails have got to be outstanding now for them to make any sort of mark, like the one you had earlier in Brew to Me. That really stood out, didn't it? And we've also had Dark Element on the podcast, and his beers stood out as wonderful pails, and I think you've got to be right up there for you to make a mark with that kind of beer now.
Yeah, 100%.
Back to the matter in hand, how's the Pinot Porter?
Brilliant. In a word, actually, I know exactly what this is like. Do you remember before Christmas when we did Durham and we were blown away by how good Durham's beers were? This is great. It's not that oaky or smoky to taste. It might have smelt it when the bottle was opened.
That's almost what you want, actually. So you've got that lovely aroma when you open the bottle, but it's not overpowering when you drink it.
It's a porter, but you know what? I think the oak is there, comes in a little bit at the back, and the smokiness, but it's faint. It's almost a bit like, it sounds really bad, but in a good way. If you smoke a cigarette or something and you can sort of taste it and it comes back down your throat after a couple of swallows in, there's nothing. It does that. And the Pinot is there. And for me, what that does is it makes it quite a full porter. It's definitely not a stout because it's still light-bodied enough, but it's got this sort of lovely richness to it. It's really good. I think I know what score it might be getting on Untapped.
Oh, wow. That sounds very positive.
It's going to be very close to it. I don't see why it shouldn't be, because it's...
Wow, the maximum.
I think so. I can't fault it. It does exactly what it's... As I always say, it does exactly what it promises it's going to do. And it does it really, really well.
Going to my beer, it's actually called a Brute IPA.
Yes, these were a thing for a while. I like a Brute IPA.
Do you remember the Brute IPA? You used to see them quite a lot, didn't you?
I love a Brute IPA.
This is from the 2022 harvest. I've only just noticed that this is actually 7%. 7% secondary fermented with grape from Yorkshire Hart Vineyard. And the first thing to say is we're so used when we have Nelson at Sauvin in our beers to those beers being big, thick, yellow juice monsters. But this is not like that at all. It is far less dense than some of those beers.
That's really clear.
Really clear, really light, really tangy, and not at all as I expected, if I'm going to be honest with you.
I guess so. When you think it's coming from a vineyard,
well, that's the thing.
It's not going to. You're not going to get a bottle of thick 7%.
And that was not a dig at all.
No.
I'm really glad that it isn't like that, because, like I said before, that Nelson, when dealt with, sometimes can be really horrible and overpowering. This is not. It's really, really not at all. It's more like a wine. That wine influence is definitely there to see. There's no doubt about that. That's really very good.
And how brute is the brute, if it makes sense? How dry is it?
It's not massively dry. For me, it's just right. Sometimes when something is too dry, it's like, oh, I need a glass of water to reset myself. It's not. It's not like that. It's just dry enough. Anyway, should we listen to Tim from Yorkshire Hart tell us all about what they do up there and how these beers came about?
Tim from Yorkshire Hart Brewery here. Thanks for reviewing a couple of our beers on your Daftaboutcraft podcast. Yorkshire Hart Brewery was founded in January 2011 in a little village called Nunmonkton, just outside of York. We're a vineyard and brewery, family run. It's my parents, myself, my wife and my son run the business. I joined the business to set up and establish the brewery, and that's how we got going with it all. We continue to grow over the years. I've now got a sort of team of 3 full-time people in the brewery and delivering, and Emma, who works in the office admin with myself and the brewery side of things. So the 2 beers you've got there today, Pinot Porter and Nelson Sauvin IPA, or Nelson Brute IPA, as we've now renamed it. These are a couple of beers we do to tie in the vineyard and brewery aspect of the business. The Pinot Porter, it's a nice smooth dark porter brewed to 7%, and then we barrel age it in our old red wine barrels that we use at the vineyard. We do grow Pinot Noir grapes at the vineyard, and we do make Pinot Noir red wine. So once we finish with those barrels, we then age the porter in them for a few months and still get the nice smooth sort of sweet porter flavours. Chocolate notes on there, followed by the nice sort of dry red wine finish on there. And then the Nelson Brute IPA, It's a very special beer, this one. Not quite sure if there's any other beers quite like it out there. So we only brew it once a year in October during our grape harvest. And what we do, we brew the beer it's single hopped using Nelson Sauvin hops from New Zealand, which is supposed to give nice sort of white wine flavours into the beers. Once it's finished fermenting, we then pour 20 to 25 litres of juice from our Sauvignon Blanc grapes, which are sparkling wine grapes that we grow at the vineyard. And then we add some sparkling wine yeast and seal the tank up and let it ferment again for a couple of weeks, just to lightly ferment up to finish at 7%. Once we're happy it's finished fermenting and matured for another week or two in the tank, we then get it bottled into the nice swing top 750ml swing top bottles that you've got there. Hope you enjoy the beers. I look forward to reviews. Thank you. Bye.
Well, thanks very much, Tim. That's a really fascinating insight. They brew these beers once a year, been going for some time. We hadn't heard of them, and now we found them. And I want to find more of their beers now, because I'm really impressed with these. Well, this one that I'm drinking, and you are with yours as well. Can't wait to open the Pinot Porter, actually.
I cannot speak highly enough of the Pinot Porter. While we've been talking, I'm having a look. I mean, they've got a good range. It's quite a traditional range, which again isn't a dig. Just been talking about that kind of thing. It's all in bottles. There's a citrus IPA. There's pale. There's plenty there.
I do love the allure of a big bottle like these, or
yes.
The 750s. There's something special about them.
I don't know about you, but I kind of feel like that's sort of where I'm heading a bit with my buying now as well.
Says the man with a shelf full of 750ml bottles.
which he's got for free. But I don't know. It's starting to feel like that's the kind of thing I want to do.
Listeners who've been with us from the start will have heard us go through many ups and downs of liking some things and not liking other things, and it's always changed, isn't it? It's beer, but it's always changing, and our views are always changing as well.
Exactly, and these aren't the only 750s actually that Yorkshire Heart do. You can also get a 2-pack of the Vale of York, which is a pale and an amber ale, both come in at 6%. And, they sound quite classical, but again, I'm really interested. And also, while we're talking about these beers, I have to mention the fact that if you want a bottle of this porter or a bottle of this Brut IPA, £5.50 a bottle.
Actually, I did know that, because having said we get free stuff, there's a little insight for you. We bought a bottle each, we paid for a bottle each, and then Tim very kindly also sent us a free one each as well. So we've had 2 of each of these beers, paid for one, got the other free. But yeah, what a price. What an outstanding price that is. That must be one of the best priced beers in the country.
For that price and for that quality of beer, that's insane. I don't want to give Tim ideas, but you could have put a 1 in front of that.
Yeah, I was going to say you could double it, no problem, and you wouldn't bulk at it, would you?
Nope, not at all.
And the same with the one I've got. Well, while I carry on enjoying it, I mentioned to you recently, Dave, that I'd got an idea for a new feature on the podcast, and
yes,
I've thought of a feature where we get something off our chest on each episode, and I was thinking, instead of calling it, when you're joking, everything, you have top bants. Well, how about top rants?
With a Z?
Obviously with a Z.
Lovely.
So I'm going to start it now. So I've got a top rant for this time. This may develop into a feature, it may not. It just depends if we see anything that makes us angry. But I saw the other day, I can't remember the name of the brewery, but this was on Instagram. It was a brewery, relatively new brewery, I think, and they posted a picture of their can art. Now, you may have seen this, I'm not sure, and everybody was piling in the comments, saying, oh, this is a disgrace. This is an absolute disgrace. You're using AI-generated artwork. This is a disgrace. You shouldn't be doing that. You're a craft brewery. You should be employing local artists to do it. I tell you what, take a break. Leave the probably one-man brewery alone. He's working hard enough on his beers. Does he need you all piling on, giving him grief for his artwork? Why are they doing that?
I didn't see that. It feels very much like, well, at the risk of categorising too heavily, people are a bit too... I appreciate the sentiment of saying, your craft, you should... That's not real world thinking matching. It's
idealistic. It's idealistic.
Thank you. That's exactly the word I was looking for, but couldn't put my finger on. Yes, it's idealistic, as we well know, and we've hopefully tried to put across in the amount of episodes we've done. Like, a lot of these people are either working a job and then doing this, or if they're not, they've just left a job and they're doing this, and they are doing this 7 days a week.
Yeah,
it is an unrelenting industry. And it's something that I think when we got into it, we kind of thought like, oh, the big breweries will send us some beers and we'll talk to them and it'll be really fun and it'll be easy. And then actually the podcast has developed into something shining a spotlight on smaller people. And what we found from that is, people are working their day job and then they come in the evening and they sort of have dinner or something, or maybe not even that. And then they go, right, I've either got to clean out the mash tun and get ready to do the next brew, or I've got a brew night. And exactly.
The last thing those people want then is to, they've proudly put some pictures of their cans of their new beers on the internet for people to see. And like there was loads of comments like, oh, this is a disgrace, it shouldn't be AI generated. He's probably so time pressurized that he hasn't got time to deal with all that sort of stuff. So he's taken the easy option because he's spending time making the beer to put in those cans. Leave him alone. Let him get on with it. What's it got to do with anybody?
And the thing is as well, like, you just don't know circumstance. Like, perhaps in that circle, they don't have someone who is good with graphic design. Sometimes we find when we talk to breweries that either, their partner or a friend of a friend or someone can do it for them, or they themselves have a background in it. We've met people who have a background in graphic design and things like that who can do it. If it's not your forte, but you just want to brew a good beer, and then you're like, well, I don't know anyone who can do it on the cheap.
In fact, I'll tell you what, instead of maligning the person for this, why doesn't somebody out there offer to help him, offer their services? Which is essentially what we've said with craft beer. It should be. It's that sense of community, and we've had that recently where we found it, and it's still there. And I can see why that got you wound up. On this podcast, we had a beer which was it was designed essentially by AI, wasn't it? Do you remember? I had my brew to me. Oh yes, yeah. Atelier, wasn't it? Yes. It was a great beer, and they did their can art AI generated. They asked AI what would it look like, and they did, and the can art was generated by AI. So they were the ones that actually supplied the AI generated voice note as well, and we didn't find that out until right at the end. Do you remember? Yep, exactly. So I just think you don't need that. You don't need that. Also, I've got another rant. People in the boating community, when I'm walking my dog on a morning, and I got very partridge. When I'm walking my dog on a morning and I said good morning to you when you sat there on your narrow boat, don't ignore me. It is so rude. It is so very rude. Rant over. More top rants next time. Well, I would love to sit and finish this off. And there is a part of me that really, really wants to. But the other part of me has had 2 nights of absolute hell from our 10-month-old who has had tonsillitis, and it seems to have completely messed up his nighttime routine, but at the time of recording, fingers crossed, he's doing really well. If he wakes up, you want to give him a tot of the Pinot Porter. If he wakes up, I just want to get him back to sleep as quick as possible because he's been such a nightmare. But yes, if that hadn't happened and we were, say, recording a week ago, I think I would have sat and just polished this off. Do you remember in the old days when we used to sit up until about 1 a.m. recording this stuff and then open up more beers when we'd finished? The lockdown glory days. Oh, anyway, I think it's another resounding thumbs up for Yorkshire Heart. These are great beers, and if you want to find out a bit more about them and you want to try their beers, get onto their website. Like Dave says, they're really, really well priced, and you cannot go wrong with these. These are excellent. Honestly, this is one of the best beers. I think this is probably up there. It's got to be in the mix for best beer I've had so far this year, and we're getting towards nearly halfway through, and it's just outstanding.
Daftaboutcraft, the craft beer podcast.
Well, that is your lot. That is everything from us for another episode, which has been brought to you with tapdoor.com. We'll be back in 3 weeks' time, Bank Holiday Monday, for more news, reviews, tastings, and everything else you usually get on Daftaboutcraft. We'll see you then.